Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on shaping stronger boards. My name is Laura Hennighausen. I am the Director of Strategic Philanthropy here at Purpose Possible. And we are so happy to have you here today. A note at the top, if you want a copy of these slides, you will get them if you've registered. And if you want to, you can go to purposepossible.com/board survey. And you can sign up there to stay in the loop as we continue to release our research, some templates and different suggestions, tips on how to run a great board. So please make sure you sign up and you'll get our slides there. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to kick us off here with our information. So let's see. We often hear stories about boards, but less often, I think, do we look at patterns across multiple organizations. And so that was something that we think a lot about at Purpose Possible as we work with hundreds of different nonprofit organizations. Most all of them obviously have a board of directors. And so this was something that's important to us and that we want to make sure that we understand to the best of our ability how to help our clients maximize their board service and make that an enjoyable experience for folks on the board and for executive directors. I myself chair 2 boards here in Atlanta, and I've served on many other boards. And then I've also worked with many boards as an executive director and as a development director. And so I've seen firsthand this nagging sense that there must be a better way. If boards of all different nonprofits all across our sector are experiencing the same challenges, then it must be the design of the board and how we approach board governance as an industry. So if it's a design flaw, then can we design a better system? Last year, we began to dig into that at Purpose Possible. And we issued a survey. We did 2 different surveys. One was directed to nonprofit executive directors, and the other was directed to board members of organizations. And those board members you'll see can be current board members, past board members, and in some cases, executive directors. I know a lot of us serve on other board of directors as well. So some folks may have taken both of the surveys. But they both highlighted different experiences depending on their perspective there. And I should mention too that during this presentation, please feel free to ask questions. You can put them in the comments of whatever service you're watching this on, and I'll be able to see them and I will answer them throughout, but we'll also have some time for Q&A at the end. All right, so about the surveys. We, like I said, sent 2 of them. We had one for executive directors and one for board members. So we received 40 responses from executive directors and 54 responses from board members. And again, our purpose was to really understand the effectiveness, expectations, challenges, and support needs of boards. If there was something consistent around what boards struggle with, then maybe there is something consistent we can identify about. We emphasized candid and anonymous responses. So all of this data was anonymous and get the most accurate and heartfelt responses as possible. And by the nature likely of our clients' geographic locations, and the fact that Purpose Possible has a lot of folks working with us in the Atlanta metro region, about 70 to 85% of our responses were from Georgians or folks operating in Georgia. I hope that as we continue with this research project that we will be able to hear from a lot of other folks in other states and locations around the US as well. So let's dig into who those responses were. So from executive directors, we had a good spread. We had 40 different nonprofit leaders, again, primarily based in Georgia, representing organizations across a range of mission areas and budgets. Most responses or respondents led small to mid-sized organizations. They were mostly a budget range from $250,000 to $5 million, which is a huge range, but that's about where they are. And they bring significant leadership experience. 75% of the folks that responded to the executive director survey have served in the role for 4 years or more. So these are experienced executive directors. The majority are successor leaders versus our founding executive directors. So these would be founding executive directors would be somebody that started a nonprofit. They are the original ED. Majority of these responses were from folks that have inherited their role. So they did not necessarily start their organization. They've stepped into an organization that already existed. Together, these responses provide a grounded and experience-based view of contemporary nonprofit performance. Our board member responses, this was also very interesting. So we had 54 different folks respond to this as a board, as having experience being on a board of directors of a nonprofit. Most of them are currently serving on one or more governing boards and have held board leadership roles. So we did ask them, how many of you have served as a president or a vice chair or a treasurer or something? The majority of folks that responded had. And it was very interesting to see that there were a lot of responses from folks that serve on multiple nonprofit boards. And I think that that is something that when we find a good board member, we don't want to let them go. So often our great board members are serving on more than one organization's board, but interesting to see that. These responses represent organizations, again, across a wide range of mission areas and budgets, with a strong concentration also around small to mid-sized nonprofits. And we did have a significant response from board members representing arts and culture organizations. While the majority, again, are based in Georgia, the sample does include board members from multiple regions. And I felt like we got a good, well-rounded response from a variety of folks and a variety of organizations. You can also see the budget sizes again in more depth represented by the executive director responses and the board member responses. So most of our organizations were on the smaller end, which I think is in line with a lot of the organizations that Purpose Possible has the pleasure of working with. So let's dig into this data. How effective are boards today? One of the first things we did is we asked our executive directors to rate their board on effectiveness. So we asked them several different questions. We asked them to rank their board's effectiveness on a scale of 1 to 100. The average score was a 63. We also saw that when we broke them out into smaller groups, we had about 42% or 43% of executive directors ranked their board's performance as low, and then another 20% at medium. So this really tells us that board effectiveness is mixed. It's not universally broken, but it's far from consistently strong. So we felt like there was some real value in digging into this and seeing if we can identify some of the sources of frustration. Alternately, when we asked board members to view their own effectiveness, they also responded pretty mixed. Again, not universally broken, but far from consistently strong. So our board members, when we asked them to rank themselves on what they really felt like boards in general can bring to an organization, their top focuses were on strategic thinking, supporting the executive director, financial oversight, which is, of course, a major focus and one of the requirements from the IRS on why we have a board of directors. Fundraising was ranked, and then expanding networks. So providing folks access to more folks fundraising, excuse me. We also asked them what they really liked about serving, because I think it's extremely important for us to understand how board members can serve an organization, but also how board service can benefit an individual on the board. So folks reported that they really enjoyed the opportunity to see the organization grow or succeed. They really care about contributing to a cause that they care about, having a voice in important decisions, and working with other committed people. So the kind of team building, getting to build their networks with folks on the board. when asked to rank their own experience or their own understanding. So we asked them about their understanding of the clarity of mission of the organization and also the clarity of expectations. They ranked that over 50%, but still not everybody that responded to this survey said that they felt like they understood exactly what the mission of their organization was or all of the programs, which is something important to point out. Sorry, I've got a tickle in my throat because this weather change is killing me. Okay. Another interesting thing that we found is that a positive relationship with the board does not necessarily mean that the board is effective, right? So we asked, this was to our executive directors specifically, we asked them to rank their relationship quality with their boards and also how effective they feel like their boards are. So this was a really interesting pattern in the data. That relationship quality and effectiveness, again, don't always move together. Most executive directors describe their relationship with their board as collaborative or mostly positive, but a significant portion of those same leaders rated their board as low performing overall, which is very interesting. I think this can tell us that board challenges are often not about conflict or bad behavior. I think we've all heard horror stories about bad boards, and that really is not the norm. But we are seeing in this survey data that it highlights difficulty, challenges with unclear roles, limited capacity, and structural gaps. So the desire is there, but the execution is faulty. I think that's actually good news, though, because it means that many of our challenges are fixable. Again, if anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the comments and we can answer as we go. So let's dig in next to time, capacity, and structure of boards. This was an interesting finding as well. So we asked executive directors about how many hours a week they spend on board governance activities. So meeting with their meeting with their board chairs, having board meetings, having committee meetings. And then we also were able to overlay that then with how effective they feel like their board is. And we see from this that the chart shows how board effectiveness changes based on how much time executive directors spend on board related work. So what really stands out in this data is that higher levels of engagement are associated with stronger board performance. So time and capacity do matter. I think that we need to also understand that correlation is not causation, but we did see in the data that our more effective boards are ones that have an executive director that has the time to really work with them. Spending more than 10 hours a week with your board on board governance is a lot. I think that hopefully those organizations are ones that have pretty significant capacity, a lot of staffing, so that an executive director has the time to do that. This is obviously going to be a struggle with smaller organizations that have an executive director that is wearing multiple hats. But I think it does show that time is important, that putting the time into board governance and also having a board chair, board leaders that can put the time into running this is really key to success. We also found that committees really make an impact on board success. So this chart compares organizations with board committees to those without. And what stood out to us about this is that every organization without committees rated its board as low performing. I think that we can say that committees don't automatically make boards effective, but the absence of committees, I think, would indicate that maybe there is more that could be done with the structure of how the board is working. And that could be a bit of a warning sign if you don't have this kind of structure in place for board service. Organizations with board committees are far more likely to report effective boards than those without. Committees, of course, like I said, don't guarantee success, but the absence of that structure is a clear risk factor. So if you don't currently have committees at your board, even if you have a pretty small board, I think it's worth looking into adding committees or revisiting how your committees are structured, making sure that your committees have a charge, that they have tasks for the year, and that they're clear on them. So they have timelines, they have goals, they have deliverables, and everybody knows what they're expected to do in those committees. Where boards struggle most. So these were our top indicators of where things are difficult. When we asked executive directors what gets in the way of stronger boards, the answers were pretty remarkably consistent. The biggest barriers aren't about motivation or conflict. Again, people on your boards, likely most of them want to be there. They are volunteering their time. They're passionate about your mission. So it's not the motivation that's lacking. It is issues with capacity, clarity, and the systems of board governance. These are all entirely about systems. So capacity and follow through. Board members or the executive director said that they felt their board often showed up at meetings, had great conversations, and then left, and nothing happened in between the meeting, right? So that follow through, and also capacity for the level or the amount of assistance that many executive directors are hoping the board can help with, might be really too much capacity, too much work for board members that have full-time jobs and full lives. They also identified fundraising skill gaps, which I'm sure is not a surprise to anyone listening to this today. I think that most folks that come and serve on a board don't have much background in fundraising, right? Unless you find some really great board members or you're bringing on development directors to sit on your board. That's not inherently something that people are comfortable with. So making sure there's plenty of time for training, but also looking at fundraising very holistically and understanding that there are a lot of places where board members can plug in to help with fundraising that aren't just going out and asking someone for a check. So for example, that could be inviting their friends and family to attend an event. That could be introducing the executive director to someone that they know that works at a foundation. That could be asking the board member could ask their team at work to come and do a lunch and learn more about the organization and why they serve. There are a lot of things that board members can do easily that feel comfortable to them, depending on their personality, their skill set, their background, ways for them to still help with fundraising and make sure that they're hitting those goals and that those goals are realistic for every person on your board, not just a blanket expectation. They also pointed out that recruitment is hard and that pipelines often, I think most of the boards I have experience with, I think we can relate to this again. We think about board recruitment when it is time to recruit, right? When we need to onboard our new board members, we think at the end of the year, oh no, I got to go do that. Really, board recruitment needs to be something that's been thought of and planned throughout the year, every year. So making sure that is a consistent practice. And then again, structural constraints. So just understanding the cadence of meetings, committee meetings, kind of how things are happening and making sure that your board agendas and how you're delivering that information is in ways that boards can really access and understand. Where boards underperform, we see that underperformance is actually much more common than overstepping, which is great, right? We all, I think, have also heard horror stories about boards trying to come in and really run things or micromanage the staff. It looks like, thankfully, that is not the norm, but underperformance is a much more common issue. Executive directors were much more likely to describe their boards, again, as underperforming, and fundraising was by far the most common challenge, followed by recruitment, engagement, and diversity. Again, fundraising being such a challenge, I think, highlights what I would suspect that we have unrealistic expectations of our boards for fundraising. Either we are asking them to fundraise a higher dollar amount than is realistic, or we are asking them all to go out and fundraise in the exact same manner, or we're not giving them any instruction at all. I think that there are some tweaks, some levers you could pull within your boards to make that a little easier. But again, seems like this is the very common thing that we're all identifying as being an issue, which to me means that there is a flaw in the design, right? When we dug more into fundraising expectations, we asked board members and executive directors about those expectations. So they're one of the more contested aspects, again, of board service. While some leaders find them helpful, most described, we asked executive directors this question, most describe them as mixed, depending on clarity, capacity, and context. So again, they're kind of uncertain of whether this is helpful for their organization or not. They're not necessarily able to track, or they're not tracking the success of board members' fundraising, or they're not sure really how to quantify that. We also asked if we felt, or if respondents felt like fundraising expectations limit who serves on their board. So I think with the community-centric fundraising practices, we are all investigating what it means to be a good board member, right? So traditionally, in some cases, we would expect that board members would be high net worth individuals or have connected networks in that space. And there's a real concern that if that is your priority, that you might not be accurately representing the community that you're serving through your board members, right? If your board does not look like the community you serve, how can they really effectively help you govern the organization, right? Most executive directors said that they don't believe that fundraising expectations has limited who has wanted or could serve on their board. But then about a third said that they weren't sure, which is, I think, something to dig into. And I think that what I have personally seen more often than not is that we will see board members join a board without a clear understanding of what those fundraising expectations are. And then they become overwhelmed or frustrated, and then they feel guilty because they are not fulfilling that portion of board governance as they'd like to. And again, in large part, that's because the expectation was not set very clearly in the beginning for them to understand what they actually need to do or what support they might get from the organization in order to fulfill those roles. We did also ask board members if they felt like these fundraising expectations were limiting their success. We asked, do you feel your ability or willingness to fundraise has shaped your level of influence or inclusion on the board? And half reported yes. And that's interesting. I think that is board members telling us that they feel like those that can fundraise effectively, or those that are the ones bringing in a big dollar gift, are valued or listened to in some cases more than other board members who might not have that same sort of network. So this is something for us to really think about and make sure that, board members that can fundraise effectively are awesome and we need them. But there are a lot of other ways that board members can support an organization. And so we shouldn't just limit our appreciation and celebration of board success to fundraising. I was also interested to see, we asked board members if they've ever felt pressure to fundraise in ways that felt uncomfortable or misaligned with your strengths. I'm honestly surprised that wasn't a higher yes to that question. I think I see anecdotally a lot of board members that are just at a loss at how to fundraise, right? They don't know. They've never thrown a fundraiser necessarily. They don't know who to ask. They feel like they don't have the right connections. And so I often see that people, again, feel guilty in their board service. And that is something we absolutely need to avoid. We need to make sure everybody feels equipped and that they are also, feeling joy in their board service, that they're really participating in a way that feels valuable to them and valuable to the organization. We also dug into alignment or misalignment between boards and staff. And we saw that some, that we align on some areas and then not in others. We did see boards and executive directors share important points of alignment, particularly around commitment to the mission, desire to support leadership, and then value of clarity and preparation, which is interesting. So again, I think the first two, commitment to mission, wanting to support leadership, that is kind of the natural space that folks enter into board service. They want to help, they care about what the organization is doing. And then we can all agree too that it's important to have clarity and to prepare for our roles. So showing up to a board meeting, having pre-read your materials, having an understanding of what the agenda, what the goal is for each meeting. I think, though, we do see, and we can dig into this in our next slide here, that even though we value those things, we understand that those are important, we're not always executing on that. So we did see some consistent gaps between how boards and staff understand their roles, especially, again, about fundraising, time commitments, and what support actually looks like in practice. So on the board side, we heard that they oftentimes think, yeah, we are helping to fundraise, we're doing the things, but staff experience, the executive directors are reporting that it's still not meeting expectations. So there's a misalignment there, either on what the goal is, how to execute it, where to find resources to support. And I think that the responsibility, who in the end is responsible for the fundraising success of the organization? Is it staff or is it board? That is something to interrogate with your board and have an open conversation around. Board members are also feeling like we're showing up, we're doing the things, we're busy people, and executive directors are feeling like the engagement is uneven. And I think that is mostly showing up with folks that are able to attend a board meeting, but then aren't maybe don't have the capacity to self-motivate themselves enough in between meetings to get their board work done because they have jobs, families, vacations, health issues, lives, like all the things we all have. I think that, in our reality of a day-to-day, our job, our family, those things are going to, unfortunately, in some cases, take priority over remembering to do our volunteer service. And so oftentimes board members ask that staff or board leadership, really this should be where the chair, the vice chair come in, help remind board members in between meetings, send a little follow-up, say, hey, this is what we agreed to do. Here's the deadline, here's an upcoming event, send reminders in between those meetings to make sure that that board service is staying as top of mind as possible when in competition with so many other requirements and obligations. The board also, in general, board members reported that they feel like they govern successfully, that is their role. They understand that they are there to oversee operations. And board or executive directors, rather, in some cases reported that they feel like the lines are blurry. I think that one great thing to do with your board on an annual basis is to do a quick reminder, little, slideshow, worksheet, whatever it may be, to work through exactly what the staff responsibilities are and what the board responsibilities are. And I think that the kind of TLDR of it, right? The main thing to take away or to remind our boards is that they need to get out of the weeds and into the sky. So they need to be not doing the day-to-day programming unless you're a very micro organization and you need that from your board members. But generally, board members should not be in the day-to-day operations, planning events, doing all that kind of stuff. They are there to be the executive director's brain trust and a support system for skills that the executive director or the staff might not have, like legal skills, accounting, professional networks, experience in planning or, resource management, things like that. So think of the board as a brain trust in that And the board should think of themselves that way as well, not the micromanager in the weeds. So, what would actually make boards more effective? That's what we're all trying to get to, right? And I think that what we found, our executive directors said that these are the things that make the most difference they have found in their own experience managing boards. So clear roles, making sure that board members really understand their roles. That could look like making sure that you have a job description for your board, for board members, job description for board leaders, so board chair, vice chair, treasurer, secretary, maybe a clear committee charge or charter that explains what each committee does, what they're responsible for, what is in scope and what is out of scope. Those are all really important to outline and make sure everybody is familiar and comfortable with what their role is. Preparation is super important. So being prepared for board meetings, that should be that the board chair is helping to organize the agenda and leading the meeting. The executive director there is there to help offer support, context, ask for whatever support they need. But the board leadership is making sure that those things are put together, that we have an agenda, that we're going to start and end on time, and we're going to send out pre-reads to the rest of the board with enough time for them to actually read them before the event. Accountability is super important. So making sure that all of board members are agreeing on what they're accountable to, how they're going to participate, how they're going to show up during the year, and then making opportunities to check in on that accountability throughout the year. So it's a great practice to do a board commitment form at the beginning of the year, but that's only going to work if you actually look at it, right? If you don't just sign it and then throw it in the trash or put it in the bottom of your backpack, you need to remind yourself, the board members need to be reminded of what their expectations are, what they signed up for, and what they specifically said that they were going to do this year, how much they were going to donate, if they were going to attend a specific event, if they were going to buy tickets to something. Making sure that that is a shared accountability measure. Having opportunities for training and coaching, making sure that, you can ask your board, is there a specific topic or something you would like some training or help on, and making sure that the board leadership can put that together for a board meeting. And then again, openness to change. So challenging the sacred. Don't just assume that because something has always been done this way that it needs to be that way. Maybe you play with your agenda. Maybe you play with how often you have a board meeting or what a board meeting looks like. Trying and iterating on different options to see what works best. Board members echoed many of these same themes, particularly the need for clear expectations, better onboarding. We saw a lot of board members say that onboarding made the difference for their board service. And those that said that they really struggle with clarity on mission or clarity on expectations also reported not having a significant onboarding process. So that is really important, especially for your new board members. And then just more guidance on how they can actually be helpful. So asking board members, asking a specific person on your board to help with something specific. Be as clear as possible with your board. And ask them for what you actually need. I'm speaking to you, executive directors. Tell your board exactly what you need help with, because if that's not clear, then that's, I think, where we get folks that will come up with some new project that they want to do that might not align with our goals and visions for the year. Or they become disengaged and they don't show up to meetings because they don't really understand how they can support the organization. They don't feel valuable. So let's tie this up. Implications and opportunities. If you take 3 things away from this and from what we've seen so far in our research, the main things that are important for board governance, successful boards: time, clarity, and structure. So making sure that you are putting the time into the board. That could be that board members are spending the time to actually show up, read their pre-reads, and go to the meeting and participate. that your board leadership has enough time and is understanding of that commitment to help put together agendas, to read the minutes and disperse them for review, to call votes, to really understand what's happening. We should never have a board chair who shows up to a meeting and does not know what the meeting is about, right? The board chair should be part of that process. Clarity, making sure everybody understands what their role is, what their goals are, their goal as an organization. So maybe what your top 3 goals are for the year for the organization, goals for the board itself, goals for committees, and then goals as individual board members. Every board member should be able to name what those focus areas are. And then structure, being super clear, making sure that everybody understands when board meetings are, having committee meetings, and making sure there's a shared accountability structure for all of that great work that's going to be done this year. We also heard some real suggestions that indicated success were having smaller boards. So that might be a board of 8 to 10 to 12 folks as opposed to 18, 20 plus members. Having a more tight-knit group of folks that really understand and are kind of in it to win it together can make a difference. Mandatory trainings, so peppering that in throughout the year along with your regular meeting structure, maybe adding a training into those. Time and hands-on engagement, so making sure and making opportunity for your board meetings to have time to actually get something accomplished together. So sometimes we have board members sign thank you notes to our major donors. Why not have them actually sign them during the board meeting altogether? So do body doubling or get something done productive so you can walk away from the meeting being able to check something off your list. Facilitation and openness to ideas from volunteers. So on the executive director side, being open to hear some strategy or suggestions on programs or whatever it could be from the board, but also having a clear delineation between, again, the board's decisions and the executive director's decisions. Making sure your board meetings are less formal and more action-oriented again. So nothing is worse, I think we can all agree, nothing is worse than sitting at a meeting and listening to folks read off reports that are already in the agenda. Not everything needs to be gone over with a fine-tooth comb at every meeting, right? If there is a committee report or if there are minutes, those should be sent out in advance. Folks should read them. And then if there are questions, those can be addressed during the agenda or during the meeting, but they don't need to be gone over line by line. And then yet again, number one thing, clear expectations, making sure folks really deeply understand what they're signing up for and how they can be successful at that, because everybody wants their gold star. Everybody wants to do a good job. Nobody is really signing up for a board just to sign up. I guess there are probably a couple people out there that are doing it, but you know, everybody wants to do a good job, right? So making sure they understand how they can do that, how they can show up and be their best. So we have some time for Q&A. If you are on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, you can type a comment and submit a question that way, and I'm happy to answer them. And in the meantime, I'll wait to see if we get any questions. I want to reiterate, of course, that if you sign up for, if you have signed up for this webinar or if you signed up for the survey information, you will get the slides for this. But if you would like to get the slides, if you would like to stay in the loop as we continue this research, because this is an ongoing project for us, we're going to do more investigation, potentially focus groups. We're doing some hands-on experimentation with some boards, and we're going to continue to develop this throughout the year. We are also planning hopefully an in-person workshop later in the year, perhaps with a local legal services organization that can really help with making sure our boards understand the legal implications of serving Anyways, all that stuff. We got a bunch of stuff coming up. Make sure you're staying in the loop. If you go to our website, purposepossible.com/board survey, you can sign up to be on the list to receive these things. And don't forget, if you need help with a board service, if you have questions, if you need help in any way as a nonprofit leader, remember Purpose Possible. You can come look at our website to see our menu of opportunities, different services we offer, and we always have other free webinars and items coming up. So I do see we have a couple questions. Our board is the one area in which we struggle with diversity. What are you seeing here? So I think that for board diversity, it can be a challenge, right? It's hard because oftentimes in our board recruitment, we are relying on word of mouth. We are relying on our current networks or our board members' current networks of folks to identify who should be on our board next, right? And that's not always the best. That means that we're going to limit it to folks that are already in our current circle. They might look alike. They might come from the same backgrounds. We might all have the same lived experiences. One thing that I have seen some success in is making sure that you are posting your board job description and an application on your website, on LinkedIn, that you are getting that out there so that anybody that might be in the periphery of your organization, maybe somebody that has attended one of your events might see it and be very interested. And we've seen some really great board prospects come in through that. There are also programs locally in Atlanta, locally in DC, that will do board training and then help match prospects that way. And then I think some of the natural places also to find board members would be in your volunteer base. So if you have volunteers at your organization, and then your donor lists, really make sure you're combing your donor lists. But I think one of the smart things to do is definitely to publish the job description and application as far and wide as you can. And don't forget to really consider board members that maybe weren't, maybe wouldn't necessarily be on your radar. So let's say college students or recent grads. Those board members can have a lot more time than some of their older colleagues might have, right? So they might actually be really valuable and give you good insight on your programs and how to market things or how to share things nowadays. So, you can connect to alumni associations or leadership programs that are local to your organization to identify folks that way as well. But I would just make sure that we're not relying on who knows somebody who might be a good board member. You are kind of pushing it out there in as many places as possible. I also see another question. I serve on a board that has 1-year terms. It's hard to get larger initiatives completed. There's always a learning curve. Why might an org have this 1-year commitment? So I think, board terms are really important, right? We should all have board terms. It's important because it keeps folks moving in and out of the organization, right? You get fresh ideas, fresh energy that way. It also allows you an off-ramp. So if you have folks that are not as involved anymore, maybe their time commitment has changed, maybe they're not a great board member, you have an opportunity to cycle some of those folks off through that as well. A 1-year commitment is really challenging. I think that is hard because you do lose a lot of institutional knowledge there, and it would be hard for leadership to be trained up, behind the current board chair, or the current, campaign chair, committee chair, whatever that looks like. I would always recommend having at least a 2-year term that's renewable so that folks can feel like they can learn on the job and get really good at the leadership portion of it before it's their turn to lead in those roles. I could see a 1-year commitment or very short-term commitments being useful if you have a really large pool of folks already to look to find new board members. And if it was a huge time commitment, maybe, and you were really worried about burning people out each year, or just keeping the momentum, keeping folks really fresh in their roles. Maybe it's a really creative organization, really iterative. But in most cases, I think that it's important to have board terms that are long enough for folks to get experience, not too long that you have dead weight or folks that are really tired, burnt out on the board. And also always making sure that you have a system to pass on that institutional knowledge, no matter how long your board folks are on there, no matter how long your terms are, making sure there is at least overlap between people that have been on the board and new people, so not just all new people all at once. So that way that institutional knowledge experience can be shared throughout the organization and isn't lost. Awesome. I think that's all the questions that we have right now. If you have any more, feel free to dump them in the chat there. But you can always reach out to us at Purpose Possible. You can find our email on our website, and we're happy to answer more questions. And again, if you have any needs with your small to mid-sized or large, any size nonprofit, charitable organization, we are here to help. We all have deep experience working in the nonprofit sector ourselves. So I think that we can really help our organizations in a lived experience way. We know what you're dealing with. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions or comments. And I look forward to sharing more of our board governance research as we continue this project. So thank you so much.